Hey, what is up, mortals? It's Scythe here with a new video for you guys. Welcome to What If Deku Had an Intelligence Quirk, Part 1. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You guys are in for a treat. So, let us begin. The sunlight glared down upon the playground, and the midday rays rippling upon the group of children caught in a confrontation. Before a young Izuku Midoriya stood Katsuki Bakugo, blessed with a quirk capable of utilizing the sweat currently dripping from his brow as ballistic ammunition. Meanwhile, Izuku's quirk had yet to manifest itself, although the doctor had claimed just last week that he was most likely a late bloomer. It was a very common occurrence with more intricate quirks like his mother's. This information did not help him, however, when his forearm received a rattling blow from another explosion launched by Katsuki. The green-haired boy's lip quivered in a combination of frustration and fear as he stumbled back from the impact, landing square on his rump. You know, Deku, you should be grateful I'm doing this. It's the most quirk action you'll ever see, you wannabe hero. Bakugo cackled and his flunkies chuckling behind him. Midoriya pounded a fist on the ground in defiance, though. I will be a hero, Kacchan! He yelled before scrambling to his feet. His fists were soon before him in an amateur fighting pose, nose running and tears bubbling beneath his eyes. This made Bakugo's anger flare, manifesting as a massive blast that sent Deku flying backwards. You're just a quirkless loser, Deku! He bellowed, raising a hand for yet another eruption. And as he did, however, a defiant glint flashed within Izuku's eyes. That glint, much to the boy's own surprise, grew within him. He felt his body tense, almost pulse, and his mind was aloft instantly, the situation's entirety pouring into him and nestling itself perfectly within his mind. He knew the exact position of the sun, that his frenemies' lackeys were only mildly slouched, and one had an ankle that was turned about 7 degrees too far to the right, that the hand mere inches of his face had just begun to spark. The clouds overhead seemed to slow down, and the jeers and taunts aimed at him, toning themselves to be a baritone droning, the chemical reaction of Kacchan's sweat growing even stronger, feeling a change, particularly in his face, that he could not see. Deku scanned his assailant. His mind drank from his slow-motion well of information that was this unfortunate encounter, and after what felt like an hour, time returned to normal. Bakugo was understandably shocked when Izuku calmly leaned to the side of his outstretched palm, pulling the blonde boy's outstretched arm with just enough force to make him land face first. His lackeys began to approach the beaten and bruised brat, but after a single look into his eyes, the trio retreated a step in unison. Midoriya's eyes were truly alive, their shape shifting to be more rectangular than ovular, and the pupils becoming nothing more than perfect boxes. His irises glowed with minute ones and zeros, veins in his face faintly emanating a green light. Bakugo attempted another attack on Midoriya from behind, but a simple sidestep and another sharp tug sent the explosive adolescent into the pavement face first with a sharp scream. Looking up, defiant, Kacchan tried one last time to hit his foe, this time alternating hands at the last minute. Though the tactic seemed solid to him in theory, in practice it did nothing but give Deku yet another chance to introduce him to the ground. Bakugo stood once again, exposed skin riddled with small cuts, bruises, and loose bits of gravel. Huffing, he glared down Deku, gritting his teeth. Though he refused to admit it aloud, he knew the same old tactics wouldn't work on his punching bag of a classmate anymore. He turned on his heels and slinked away without another word. Blinking away the dim light that pulsed in his face, Izuku turned to the boy he had been trying to protect this whole time. The kid's eyes glittered with amazement and joy before giving his savior a massive hug. You did it! No! Izuku, you saved me! You're a hero! Those 3 words sent a rumbling of emotion deep into the freckled fighter's soul. He tried to blink away the burning in his eyes, but it didn't do much. Instead, he opted to reciprocate the hug. When the embrace was released, Izuku remembered something important. His classmate gawked as he saw Deku standing before him, eyes wanting to cry. His face, however, flaunted a broad, confident smile which somehow put the other boy at ease. You're so... The classmate struggled for words. So cool! At this, Izuku's grin broadened even further. Unfortunately, it was partially broken by the flood of tears pouring from his eyes. Years passed and the adolescents grew their quirks in their own ways. While Bakugo trained his body, Izuku learned to train his mind. He learned from his doctor that his quirk called CPU allows him to not only maintain perfect videographic memory of events, but the ability to connect similar situations and adapt nearly instantly as well. He studied heroes and villains on tape fervently, learning all of the combat styles he could think of, and even some he came across by accident, to bolster his knowledge. However, after another encounter with his childhood rival Bakugo, Deku learned he'd need to hone his own body to effectively use his skills. He began to focus on researching the human body, figuring out the optimal dietary and exercise routines for himself. He trained tirelessly, every waking moment spent either connecting ideas or honing his person. And after a few more years of mercilessly bullying at the hands of Katsuki, Izuku pushed through into his final year of school before he could apply for UA. He had memorized all he'd need to know to pass the entrance exams long ago, but that didn't stop him from becoming nervous. However, instead of becoming jittery, Midoriya found it far more effective to quietly talk through issues with himself. Laying out his thoughts in more than just his mind or on the pages of a notebook seemed to ease him. Almost like a hot bath or a cup of tea. It was simply soothing. Perhaps what concerned him the most about this year, however, was just how quiet Kacchan had become. Even just last year, Zuko couldn't count the days between sessions of merciless teasing on one hand, but now? Now, Bakugo remained quiet, stone-faced. His focus was seemingly drilling into his schoolwork, and despite all of his frenemy had done, Izuku couldn't help but crack a smile. That smile faded shortly after class just a week later, when Izuku found all of his schoolwork utterly disintegrated, or otherwise scorched and strewn haphazardly across the main courtyard. He should have been mad. Izuku knew he should have been livid, seething even. Maybe he could have cried, or thrown a fit, or scrambled to pick everything up. Instead, he surprised even himself by just taking a single deep breath and walking away. He had every right to be royally pissed off. His mind had a free pass to become a cacophonous storm of revenge plots and petty rebellion. But instead, he felt something within him spark. A blinding flame unattended, but still burning nonetheless. He felt a clarity he hadn't come across in years. His determination had returned, and it screamed at him to go beyond. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. With the services Skillshare provides, you can get access to many in-depth tutorial videos on basically anything you want to learn. Each class that they have is bound to help you with your creative endeavors. Do you want to learn how to make videos like this one? Or even to learn how to write scripts? Or edit audio? Skillshare has you covered. And with our link, you can have a 14-day free trial. So what are you waiting for? Click the link now and get 14 days worth of classes for free. Link in description below. Now back to the video. To prepare for the inevitability that was the entrance exams, Midoriya trained his body every second he could during the day, internalizing all of the pertinent test information he could at night. Even if it felt tedious and the information was entirely locked in place, he would go over it one more time. Even if his muscles ached and his joints creaked, he would power through one more rep. On this particular afternoon, Rikiya Haruma, the young boy Zuko had saved from the wrath of Bakugo, joined the green-haired teen as he walked to the grocery store. The pair had both been tasked to go grocery shopping every other week at the same store, so they decided to help one another through the time-consuming task. Their lists were especially short today, only about 15 items apiece. As he reached for the bags of rice flour on the top shelf, a task Haruma took on due to his shocking height of 6'3". The scarlet-haired boy blinked. You really still think that I, of all people, should go to UA? Even with my great-great-grandfather's notoriety? Honestly, I do. You've got to realize how badly they'll want to ensure that you don't become a villain, so your entry would most likely be easier. Before his friend could mutter a response, Suzuki sighed. And yes, I know that you won't. You've said it multiple times now, and you have the moral compass to ensure that. But you also just can't become some researcher. A quirk specialist? Huffed Rikiya. And why not? It's a fantastic job, and it'd help just as much as becoming a hero. With your mind, Midoriya, I'm surprised you haven't chosen to become one. You've got the research to ace every question that they could throw your way. Deku heaved a sigh. He knew this conversation didn't have to happen. He knew he was the one who brought it up, so he rubbed his eyes with his elbow as he snagged a few cans of coconut milk from the end of the aisle. I know, but if I can directly apply that knowledge in the field, and provide research aid in between villain captures, it would take effect 20 times faster! Besides, this goes beyond intelligence, Rikiya. He met his friend's eyes with a blip of malachite light shining within his own. I've wanted to become a hero since before I had this quirk. I want to save people with a smile on my face. I also want to have you with me, since you're pretty much the only person who doesn't shun me for that dream. In fact, you support it. Izuku broke eye contact, sighing softly as he placed the cans in his cart. I can't argue with that. Harima muttered. Scratching the back of his head, his gaze shifted to the ceiling. You know, I remember when you first talked to me about joining UA with you. The whole strategy of tag teaming the test? His eyes fell upon Deku once again. I admire how well thought out that was. You've got a knack for strategy, that's for sure. Midoriya didn't turn around, instead reaching into the cooler before him for some fresh cuts of meat. A hand on his shoulder caused him to pause. Rikia, what are you? Muttered Izuku. He turned to meet the intense gaze of his friend, mere inches from his face. If I'm going to UA with you, then you've got to promise me one thing. He held up a sheet of paper next to his face, backing up a couple of feet. He jammed a finger towards the documentation as he spoke. I've already applied for UA here, but the only reason I turn it in is if you promise me we'll both go in individually to test our own powers separately. We're both extremely strong for our age, but I don't want to tag team the entrance exams just to get through. I want to know you and I can both get in on our own. Midoriya blinked. And that's it? Just like that? You'd apply to UA? Yes, but not necessarily as a hero. I still need to do a little bit of soul searching like you said I should. I need to decide if I want to be a hero or a researcher. He scratched his cheek absently. Well, I suppose I could always ask for a bit of extra work to gain credits for both sides. I'm pretty sure I'd be the first person to do that, but hey, it'll keep me busy. Deku blinked again. He'd fought Harima on this point dozens, if not hundreds of times before. Suddenly he had the entire dang application filled out? The calculating teen shook his head, a smile suddenly sprouting upon his lips. You were always going to apply, weren't you? Deku cooed. You filled that out after the second or third debate because you didn't know for sure. Rikia put his hands behind his head, looking away with an irritated look. No, it was the 7th time. At this, Midoriya paused, then broke out into an immense bout of laughter. Soon, Harima joined him, and the two used one another as support as they regained their breath. Izuku spoke first. Well, if all it takes is for us to prove ourselves individually, then I'll be more than happy to accept that ultimatum. UA wouldn't be nearly as amazing without you, Rikia. Midoriya grinned broadly, the soft smile he knew put Harima at ease. Harima returned a similar grin as the two continued onwards. Shortly after completing their lists, they shuffled into the checkout line, avidly debating over whether or not Kasui Woods would be able to merge his body with the living tree with his quirk to become something akin to an ent. Deku caught a glance at the individual in front of them for just a moment. Shaggy golden hair drooping over a scrawny, hunched-over skeleton of a body. The man's clothes might as well have been 3 times the size too big, with how baggy that they looked. And when he turned to inspect the candy choices next to the conveyor belt, his black sunken eyes betrayed sharp blue irises. Those eyes held something more, something Izuku could pick out in a crowd from a mile away. It was a spark of immense determination. One whose unshifting attitude brought comfort to heroes and civilians alike as villains cowered in fear. His strong yet gentle smile upon finding a final item in his choices of gum and chocolate all but confirmed it for Deku. This man had to be. His thought process was interrupted by a scream permeating the air in the store. It's a villain! A massive one! In the blink of an eye, Midoriya bolted out the front door, dropping his groceries to see what was going on. And as soon as he did, he felt a similar impact as slamming Spread Eagle into a swimming pool. He heard glass shatter, and only after a few seconds did the pain truly register. Then and only then did he meet the yellow eyes of a living conglomerate of sludge. They stared at one another, one in fear and the other in shock. And then, much to Izuku's horror, the blob smiled. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you guys enjoyed. Before you leave, we would like to just let you know that we the Celestials have many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. But that's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.